This chapter focuses heavily on database programming and features a lot of code. Hopefully, your education has led you to working with some of these programming languages mentioned, like C++, Java, or Python, so these concepts aren't foreign to you. You'll notice some database programming is associated with C and others Java. Here are the concepts we will cover within this chapter. Again, note there is a bit of programming code. As mentioned, databases often run off of Java or some form of C, whether it be C, C++, or C#. COBOL is an outdated programming language that was commonly used in the banking field. An interactive interface is preferred to just typing commands and statements. Hence, our use of the MySQL workbench for our projects within this course. Embedded SQL saves us time, and is run and compiled before we do anything, as long as they are uploaded into the database management system. A library of database functions is literally like importing a class in programming. An API importation is the same as you may do in app or web design with, say, the Google API as an example. If the host programming language does not jive with SQL, there are issues. Perhaps Fortran programming language does not work well with SQL. You have done most of this already based on what you did with Project 1. Our database server was elvis.rowan.edu. Programming or host languages interact with SQL in different ways. Again, C and Java are most common. Here, we are using the exec command, which executes a command within SQL. This code would run before anything else, as it is embedded SQL. You'll notice it is in C. Here are examples of SQL C commands related to connection. You saw how much easier it is to do using an interactive interface like MySQL Workbench within Project 1. As with programming functions, database commands can have set function methods or variables. Here is a great summary of how SQL state command would be viewed. What is our current state? Again, this code would run beforehand, being that it is embedded SQL. Again, it is in C programming language. In SQL, the cursor is used more to highlight a certain tuple of importance and is only moved while using fetch commands. So it is not like I can do now by just moving my cursor with the mouse. Here, we're using cursors with code ran beforehand because it is, again, embedded SQL in C language. Can you tell where the cursor is moving? It is moving along the tuples with social security number, first name, etc., as our code suggests. Here is an explanation of the elements associated with the declare, withhold for, order by, and for read only for update of commands. You have seen order by in previous chapters. Dynamic SQL is like dynamic web pages, where they are constantly changing based on commands and not static. Here, we can type in updated commands up to 256 characters for our database based on our dynamic SQL code here in C programming language. SQLJ, or SQL Java, can utilize many aspects of Java, such as inheritance of class. This probably looks familiar from Java programming. We're importing 5 different classes here. Can you find them? Obviously, they all have import in front of them. Here, we are defining variables using Java. We are setting salary and sal variables to doubles because they can have decimal places, and so on and so forth with the other variables here. Notice here, our code uses both SQL and Java. Ah, good old system.out.println, reminding most of you why Python programming language is preferred these days. There are 3 types of iterators in SQL Java. In Java, we only tend to use a regular iterator. Here, we have code for a named iterator. Notice the code on line 9. All our attributes are listed. Here, we have code for a positional iterator. Notice the code on line 9, where only attribute types are listed, not attributes and types like a named iterator. Just the attribute type. Just like with any programming language, we can use functional programming in SQL. SQL in C keeps a number of records for us. This is why SQL refers to rows as tuples and not records like in Microsoft Access. We can access records if we need to do so using handle. Notice the differences in C code and Java code? Here, we have SQL C code running a query. JDBC stands for Java Database Connectivity. SQL can rely on object-oriented programming aspects as well as functional programming aspects. Here, with our code, we are connecting to a database. You'll notice it is in Java code. Java Database Connectivity. Here, we assume we are connected and are now running a query. Like Excel, Access, and Word have macros, SQL has extensions and stored modules you can access to enhance your experiences and address your needs. If your database must be utilized in multiple formats, it is best to use persistent stored modules to limit the overuse of data transfer and power usage. This is the SQL syntax you would use to create a procedure. Parameter type, such as varchar, etc. Parameter mode is in, out, or both, stated as in-out. Just like Java, you can set conditions using an if-else statement. Similarly, you can use a while statement or loop just like you would in Java or any other programming language. Here, we are using functional programming in SQL to run a query. Each of the approaches covered in this chapter have their own strengths and weaknesses. Here, we focus on each approach's strengths associated with user experience. You now should have a firm grasp on these SQL concepts.